So, I've never really been the biggest fan of Starfleet ships. It's not that I don't like them, it's just that they're often quite vanilla. They're often the ordinary, and I've always been more interested in alien ships. So, it's quite rare for a Starfleet vessel to catch my eye, and I tend to often look for ships that have quite a unique and distinctive character. And with that in mind, I think the Parliment Class is an excellent example. It's a mix of Sovereign, Intrepid, and Galaxy-class DNA, and it works really well for what it's going for. Oftentimes, fan designs that kind of try to be late Dominion War often end up feeling too advanced. This sits about right as something that would have been designed beforehand but wouldn't have seen full production until during the war, and it gives Starfleet something which it was previously lacking. And that's the other thing. An awful lot of times, fan designs will tend to try to just do an already existing job better, and marginally so. But this fulfills a role that hadn't really been touched before, and that was the role of a battle cruiser. The closest Starfleet had to a battle cruiser in this time period was the Nebula class, which is in no way a battle cruiser. It's a very, very heavy cruiser, or you might say light battleship, but it's certainly not a battle cruiser. It lacks all the necessary qualities of speed. The other reason I like the Parliment class is that it's quite modest and quite limited. It's not like the Prometheus or the Defiant, these big uber ships that fans just jizz their pants all over because, oh, it's such a great ship, it can do so much, it's so powerful. No. The Parliment is not that. The Parliment is just a very solid design for what it needs to do. Its design tells us an awful lot about how it was built and what it exists to do. You know, storytelling through form, which I think is very good. It makes the universe feel, properly connected and inhabited rather than just being these sort of distinct eras where technology doesn't seem to overlap all that very much. The Parliament does a good job of crossing things over and mixing things together in a very satisfying way. So let's get into it. So the first thing is to understand where the Parliment class comes from. So in the run-up to the Dominion War, Starfleet was obviously taking a look at refitting a lot of different ship classes. This included older ships and this included relatively new ships, but the idea was to refit as many as they possibly could. And so the question emerged is, okay, we've got 3 generations of starship design going on. Can they mix? So, as previously discussed in a video with Drakinafel, it's likely that the California class was produced in the run-up to the Next Generation era in order to test out how compatible that technology was with the Ambassador era and what I'm going to call the Highlighter era. And similarly, for the Parliment class, it's asking, well, okay, can the TNG technology work with the Voyager technology and the Sovereign era technology? That's ultimately the question being asked by the Parliment class, and the answer seems to be a resounding yes. The Parliment class was not only successful as a testbed, but as a ship class in its own right. We have Intrepid-style nacelles, albeit greatly scaled up. These are very large, powerful, chunky nacelles. We see a Galaxy-class style deflector with some modification underslung from the hull, very much in a callback to the Springfield class. And we also have a Sovereign-style saucer section, which of course is the most modern component, and it's likely that a lot of that Sovereign technology is contained within that saucer. Its computer system was a Galaxy-style computer system because the Galaxy class had an incredibly large and powerful computer, which was very important not just for, scientific research, but also for managing the ship's large and complicated automated systems and also communicating with other ships. Now, it's worth saying that warp core placement is not clear. It's not clear whether it's in the deflector module or somewhere within the saucer. It could be either, but in any case, it's more likely that it's a Sovereign-style warp core rather than a Galaxy-style warp core, and also that would be more up-to-date and capable of supplying the necessary power to those Intrepid-style nacelles. Now, in terms of armament, it's actually somewhat light. It only has 3 phaser arrays, one very large continuous one on the dorsal surface and then smaller ones on the ventral surface, but given what we know of phaser arrays, the idea that they can chain power together, this gives us quite a wallop. Although relatively limited firing arcs, it certainly can't defend its back very easily, the ability to only engage a handful of targets at a time. It also has 4 forward torpedo tubes and 2 aft. That's about commensurate with what the Sovereign would have. And then interestingly, it has partial ablative armor, mostly on the rear sections, and this makes an awful lot of sense when you consider that it doesn't actually have much in the way of rear armaments aside from the torpedoes, so it's very aware that it's going to be chased from behind most of the time, so it needs that extra armor, because also it's probably going to just be making overshoot attacks, so it's probably just going to fly over a target, fire all its weapons, fire some suppressive torpedoes from its rear launchers as it then takes a wide arc to come back around. And so in doing that, it needs a pretty strong rear armor because that's where most of the enemy fire is going to be directed. It also has 3 protected shuttle bays, 1 above and 2 below. But this all belies what is really the true main weapon of the Parliment class, its real party piece. For starters, the Parliment has 2 dorsal heavy tractor beams. Now, these can be, of course, configured for all sorts of different jobs and do have some tactical applications. They can grab onto other ships and slow down smaller ships, but their best use is in, well, hauling large masses, and with 2 heavy tractor beam emitters, it can securely hold very large, very massive objects. To go along with this, not only do you have the extra large Intrepid style nacelles, as previously mentioned, which are enormous, but you also have 2 huge impulse engines. These are Sovereign style impulse engines, and they are enormous, which already gives us a bit of an indication as to the speeds this thing is capable of. This is a fast ship. It is capable of hauling 10 times its own mass. So a larger starship like a Galaxy broken down, easy. And it can actually get it out of the combat zone very, very quickly. And it is well armed enough that it can also provide protection to the ships that it is recovering from the battle space. Potentially, it could even be strong enough to pull a Diduridex out of a battle space. Although that is definitely going to have a bit of an impact on its speed, and it is going to be putting itself at risk because Diduridex is a huge. But that is really the most important job that the Parliment class has, is in casualty evacuation, recovery, and salvage. Because of course, everyone knows that the Dominion are capable of building ships at an incredibly fast rate, far faster than anyone else can build starships. So how do you mitigate that? Well, you can try and build better starships. That's a good choice. Make sure that each of your starships counts for 10 of theirs. But that's only going to take you so far. And when you lose that starship, you've lost something of far greater value than your enemy has. So with that in mind, salvage becomes even more important for you, because that starship represents more than just, a handful of enemy starships. It represents potentially many more that could be defeated if you have this starship back in action. So efficient response and recovery of damaged vessels was paramount, and even destroyed vessels. Salvaging parts was still very, very important, particularly when you're on the offensive and you're quite far from your supply lines. And actually, it's potentially easier to maintain your own ships by cannibalizing the wrecked ships in a captured system than it is by calling all the way to the rear for a fresh part to be sent, when of course you could just hop over to a destroyed vessel and retrieve the part from it. And again, that's something the Parliment is very capable of. Again, you've got 2 very large tractor beams which can, potentially just move whole chunks of a ship. You're missing some warp nacelles, that's fine. This ship has perfectly intact ones. That's what the Parliment class is capable of, while being on the move and while being capable of being very solid in combat. I was going to say defending itself, but that's underselling it. The Parliament is more than capable of not just defending itself, but defending other ships, and again, getting into that combat zone and getting casualties out very quickly so that they can live to fight another day. And again, that helps narrow the problem that you face with the Dominion, that problem of build rate, because you're not losing as many ships now. So then it's on the Dominion to be more careful about how they spend their ships. Just because you take out a Starfleet ship doesn't mean that it's out the fight. It can still come back to haunt you. Whereas the Dominion tend to, if a ship is even vaguely damaged, just throw it on the scrap heap and forget about it. In fact, they probably don't even throw it on the scrap heap. They probably just destroy it outright. Because for the Dominion, it's cheaper and easier to just destroy partially damaged ships than repair them. And that's a big difference between how the Dominion operates and how the Allies operate, Starfleet in particular. So, just to round off, the Parliment class was, of course, a late addition to the war, and in some ways you might expect it to try and steal the limelight, as latecomers often do, to make up for the fact that they're late. But the Parliament didn't ever do that. It just filled a niche very solidly. And it managed to be more than the testbed, which it was originally intended to be. Originally it was just a testbed, but they saw the potential of these features which they had meshed together and saw that they actually had a very unique and useful design in that. Not only is the Parliment a decent battlecruiser, but more importantly, it is an excellent support and engineering vessel. And in that way, it contributes far more to the success of the Allies than the Dominion battlecruiser ever did to the Dominion's war effort. So those are my thoughts on the Parliment class, but what are yours? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you all in the next video.